The dawn of September 1st, 1939, broke over Europe with a clarity that belied the uncertainty and tension building for years. In the quiet moments before sunrise, most of the world still believed diplomacy might prevail. Just hours earlier, some foreign correspondents in Berlin reported an unusual stillness in the capital. Newspapers updated their front pages at the last possible moment, unsure whether war had truly arrived. Yet in the highest levels of the German military leadership, the final decision had already been made. Adolf Hitler had issued a clear directive: "I shall attack Poland at dawn." Those words would mark the beginning of the most destructive conflict in human history. The political background leading to this moment was not sudden. It stretched back to the Treaty of Versailles in 1919 and continued through the global economic depression, Hitler's rise to power in 1933, and a series of territorial moves that reshaped the balance of Europe. The remilitarization of the Rhineland, the annexation of Austria, and the dismemberment of Czechoslovakia had demonstrated a pattern. Yet, despite repeated warnings from Polish and some Western intelligence sources, many European observers believed Germany's actions could still be contained through negotiation. The Munich Agreement of 1938 had encouraged this illusion, suggesting to some that concessions might preserve peace. But in reality, Germany had already planned its next step. In early August 1939, Hitler told his military commanders, "Our enemies are little worms. I saw them in Munich." While the accuracy of his confidence would be tested in time, his intent was unmistakable. The strategic aim was not simply to reverse the post-World War I settlement, but to carve out what he called living space in Eastern Europe. Poland stood directly in the path of these ambitions. Yet Polish political leadership understood the danger clearly. Marshal Edward Ryd-Smigli, the commander-in-chief of the Polish armed forces, had repeatedly warned that Germany's military growth represented a long-term threat. In a July 1939 meeting with staff officers, he reportedly said, "If Germany attacks, we will resist. There is no other path for us." Poland's foreign minister, Joseph Beck, articulated the same principle earlier that spring when he asserted, "Peace is a valuable thing, and we shall do everything to preserve it. But there is only one thing in the life of people and nations that is without price. That thing is honor." These statements reflected a national consensus that Poland would not accept German demands for territory or sovereignty over the free city of Danzig. Germany's leadership believed otherwise. Planners in Berlin expected a short, decisive campaign, relying on speed, air superiority, and the coordination of armor and infantry. The German military described this method not yet as blitzkrieg, a term applied later by journalists, but as a coordinated breakthrough strategy intended to disrupt an enemy's mobilization before it could stabilize. In the final briefing on August 31st, German commanders were instructed to bypass strongpoints when possible, penetrate deep toward operational objectives, and prevent Polish forces from regrouping. Then came the final pretext. Late on August 31st, German operatives staged the so-called Gleiwitz Incident, an operation intended to create the appearance of Polish aggression. While the event convinced few outside Germany, it provided Hitler the rhetorical justification needed to address the German public and military. At 4:45 a.m. on September 1st, 1939, the battleship Schleswig-Holstein, visiting the harbor of Gdansk on a diplomatic pretext, opened fire on the Polish garrison at Westerplatte. At nearly the same moment, German aircraft bombed the town of Wielan, causing extensive civilian casualties. The invasion had begun. Poland's defensive plan recognized Germany's numerical and technological advantages, but was constrained by geography and politics. The existence of the Polish corridor, separating East Prussia from the rest of Germany, meant that a retreat deep into the interior would abandon large populations to the enemy without resistance. There was also the expectation, reinforced by diplomatic agreements, that Britain and France would provide meaningful support should war break out. The Franco-Polish military alliance and the British guarantee to Poland in March 1939 had given Warsaw confidence that aggression would not go unanswered. As German units poured across the frontier, their objectives became clear: Army Group North sought to capture the corridor and advance toward Warsaw from East Prussia, while Army Group South pushed through Silesia and Slovakia toward the capital and the industrial heartlands. The Luftwaffe targeted communication centers, rail lines, and reserve units to impede mobilization. While German propaganda emphasized overwhelming superiority, the reality on the ground was more complex. Many Polish units fought determinedly, especially at border positions where resistance had symbolic and practical value. At Westerplatte, Major Henryk Sacharski's garrison held out for 7 days despite repeated bombardment. At Mokra, Polish cavalry units armed with modern anti-tank weapons halted elements of the German 4th Panzer Division, destroying dozens of armored vehicles in the process. German commanders were sometimes surprised by this resistance. One officer wrote in his diary, "The enemy fights with determination. Their retreat is orderly. This is not the easy campaign many expected." Although the German military enjoyed advantages in mobility, coordination, and air support, the campaign's early stages revealed that Polish forces were far from passive. However, their disadvantage in equipment and the rapidity of German advances created growing pressure on command and control. Diplomatic efforts continued even after the fighting began. On September 1st, Britain and France demanded Germany withdraw its forces immediately. Hitler rejected the ultimatum, stating in a speech to the Reichstag, "I am asking of no one anything other than what I would be prepared to do myself." But his narrative of self-defense found little support abroad. When no withdrawal occurred, Britain declared war on Germany on September 3rd, followed shortly by France. These declarations did not, however, translate into immediate military action capable of relieving pressure on Poland. As Germany advanced, the Polish government attempted to coordinate its defense while maintaining civilian administration. Government ministries relocated from Warsaw to Lublin and later to Kowal as the situation deteriorated. The Polish High Command decided to concentrate remaining forces in the so-called Romanian bridgehead, a region in southeastern Poland believed to be defensible long enough for Allied intervention. Communications difficulties, Luftwaffe attacks, and logistical disruption increasingly hindered this effort. On September 16th, German forces tightened their encirclement around Warsaw, where the population braced for a prolonged siege. Civilian memoirs describe the constant sound of aircraft overhead and the destruction of key infrastructure. Water mains were damaged, food distribution became erratic, and fires burned across entire districts. Still, the defenders continued their resistance. General Julius Rommel, commanding Warsaw's defense, issued a message stating simply, "The capital will defend itself as long as soldiers and civilians have strength." But external events soon removed any realistic chance of stabilizing the front. On September 17th, the Soviet Union invaded Poland from the east, acting under the secret protocols of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. The Polish government, recognizing the impossibility of fighting on two fronts, ordered its forces to avoid engagement with Soviet troops except in self-defense and began evacuating across the Romanian border to continue the war from abroad. German leadership interpreted the Soviet entry as confirmation that Poland could not recover. One German general reportedly remarked, "Now the campaign is decided." The fall of Warsaw on September 28th was followed by the surrender of remaining organized resistance in early October. German casualty figures were not insignificant, and the campaign, though swift, had revealed limitations in coordination that the German High Command would later analyze. The Polish campaign was used as a testing ground for operational doctrines, but it also highlighted logistical strains and communication issues that would resurface in later campaigns. For Poland, the consequences were profound. The country was partitioned between Germany and the Soviet Union, resulting in widespread displacement, political repression, and the suppression of cultural and administrative institutions. Yet Poland's military contribution did not end with the campaign's conclusion. Tens of thousands of soldiers escaped to Romania, Hungary, France, and later Britain, forming new units that would serve in multiple theaters of the war: pilots in the Battle of Britain, soldiers at Tobruk, Monte Cassino, and in Western Europe after D-Day. The government in exile continued diplomatic efforts to represent the Polish nation throughout the conflict. From an analytical perspective, the invasion of Poland demonstrated the evolving characteristics of modern warfare. Rapid mechanized movement, integration of air and ground operations, and the targeting of logistics and communications to achieve psychological and operational disruption. Yet it also showed that resistance could endure despite inferiority in equipment. The defense of Westerplatte, the battle at Wisna, and the continued resistance in Warsaw became examples studied long after the war for their insights into urban defense and morale under pressure. The events of September 1939 remain central to understanding the origins of World War II. They reveal the consequences of failed diplomacy, the dangers of expansionist ideology, and the limitations of international guarantees when not supported by immediate military capability. The invasion did not occur in isolation, but emerged from a series of decisions, treaties, miscalculations, and ideological commitments accumulated over 2 decades. The lessons continue to be analyzed by historians because they illustrate how complex political systems can fail to prevent conflict even when the dangers are widely recognized. As the war expanded in scale, many of the individuals involved in its opening hours recorded their reflections. A German officer later wrote, "We believed we were restoring the nation's strength. We did not yet understand the scale of what was beginning." A Polish soldier who fought in the defense of Warsaw recalled, "We knew we could not win, but we also knew that surrender on the first day was unthinkable." A British diplomat observing events from London concluded, "Europe had waited too long to act. Once the first bullets were fired, the path forward narrowed to a single tragic outcome." These perspectives, taken together, underscore the complexity of the moment. The invasion of Poland was not simply a clash of armies, but a collision of political ambitions, national identities, and historical processes that had been building for years. The strategic impact of the invasion became increasingly apparent as the war progressed. Germany's success in Poland emboldened its leadership, reinforcing a belief that rapid operations could overcome political obstacles. But it also contributed to the widening of the conflict into Scandinavia, Western Europe, and ultimately the Soviet Union. The Soviet occupation of eastern Poland reshaped the balance of power in Eastern Europe, influencing decisions that would have consequences long after the war ended. Poland itself emerged from the conflict with altered borders, immense human losses, and a political landscape transformed by occupation, resistance, and external influence. Understanding the invasion requires acknowledging its multifaceted nature. It was a military operation, a diplomatic crisis, and a moment of profound consequence for millions of civilians. It stands as a reminder of the fragility of peace when international mechanisms fail to deter aggression, and when ideological aims override diplomatic solutions. Today, September 1st, 1939, remains a key point in global memory not only because it marked the beginning of World War II, but because it encapsulates the intersection of decisions, ambitions, and misjudgments that allowed the war to begin. The lessons derived from this moment continue to guide historians, policymakers, and educators as they analyze the origins of conflict and the ways in which nations respond to threats.